For this lab, you will be provided with the following materials: a container that has chalk in it, a container that has powdered sugar in it, a mixture of sugar and chalk, hydrochloric acid, distilled water, these are test tube clamps, a beaker, and disposable test tubes. The goal of today's lab is to understand the properties of these two materials and then use that understanding to separate a mixture of sugar and chalk, and then collect convincing evidence that you have separated these two things. You'll need to use a small scoop in the beginning, so open up your bottles. A small scoop is about that. And then that goes right into the test tube down at the bottom. That is plenty. Otherwise, you'll be asked to measure with a scale and weigh paper. You can use this metal spatula to scoop out the sugar in the chalk. Because you'll be running a lot of tests and the sugar and the chalk look similar, you need to label your test tubes with Sharpie. On the front of it, I recommend doing S or C for chalk or sugar, and then the test that you're doing. So this is the first test, number 1, and this was chalk, 1C. And another test tube would be 1S, and so on and so forth. You'll need to heat your test tubes over a Bunsen burner, so I'm going to show you the safe way to do that. Here you can see I have my hot flame. I'm going to put my test tube into the test tube clamps like this. Make sure it's secure. I'm going to hold it by the end, and then most importantly, the top of the test tube is going to be directed away from any person. So if I have 4 people on the lab bench here, the safest way to do this is to direct this towards the wall where the lab bench is. So I heat like this, just in the top of the cone, and I heat it until I see discernible changes, and then I'm taking observation on what I see. This test tube is hot, so I'm going to place it into my beaker. Otherwise, if I put the hot test tube into the plastic test tube rack, it would melt this. When this cools off, you're welcome to move it to the test tube rack, but make sure that it is cool before you do so. If you need extra test tubes, they are here for you to grab on your own. You'll need to take photos for your documentation later on. So let's talk about what makes a good photo. If I were to take a photo like this would be hard to see with all this stuff in the background. So I recommend that you clear the background of any and all things. And then you angle it so that it is against the black background of the lab bench, and that you can crop it to where you're just seeing the material of interest. I don't need to see fingers. Make sure that your fingers aren't covering the thing that's important. Hold the test tube at the top and make it so you can crop it so it is just black background and test tube. When you are all done at the end of the period, all of these test tubes are disposable, and they can go in the broken glass box at the front of the room near the red trash can.